Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be giving you another update on Major Tropical Storm Henri. Over the past 24 hours it has shifted a little bit further to the west, so now instead of looking at an impact over Rhode Island or eastern Massachusetts for landfall, it looks like it's more likely that happens somewhere over central or eastern Long Island. Any chance of a New York City landfall is still not out of the question with the cone forecast. We're going to be breaking down what the National Hurricane Center is showing and much more. And we'll also have your photo of the day at the end of today's video. Someone sent in a cool weather photo, and if you want to send in your photos, you can go and send them to the email at the bottom of the description. So that's probably going to be a recurring thing that we do on each video, as long as we do get more weather photos for that day. So taking a look at the current National Weather Service page, you can see that we have some air quality alerts in effect for the west, with some red flag warnings in effect for a little bit of California, Nevada, Idaho, and also into Oregon. We have some flood watches for northern Idaho and into northern Washington, as well as for a little bit of central Tennessee and a little bit of upstate New York. We have some heat advisories for parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, as well as for another area in Mississippi and Louisiana, and one more area in southern Florida. And then we have all those tropical related warnings and watches up for the coastal Northeast, and we're going to be breaking those down in just a moment. Taking a look at yesterday, we had a high temperature in Death Valley, California of 108 degrees. The low temperature was in Bodie, California, where they got down to 24 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest rainfall report was in Imperial, Nebraska, where they got 4.5 inches of rainfall. And for the first time in about 2 months, we actually have a snowfall report. The highest one yesterday was 3 miles southeast of Skyway, Colorado, where they got 1.5 inches. That is in a higher elevation region, but it is cool to see some of those snowfall reports finally popping up once again. Taking a look at a zoomed in picture of the East Coast and the current watches and warnings, you can see how we do have some storm surge watches and warnings up for Long Island and a little bit of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and southeastern Massachusetts. We also have some hurricane warnings which are in effect for, I believe, some parts of Long Island and southern Connecticut that may extend into Rhode Island and Massachusetts as well. I'm not quite sure, just because those storm surge warnings are covering it up. And then we have tropical storm warnings which cover the outer lying areas, so interior parts of Rhode Island, Connecticut, some parts of the lower Hudson Valley in New York, and then also into some parts of coastal New Jersey, where we have some of those tropical storm warnings currently in place. The rest of those areas are not under any watches or warnings right now. Looking at the National Hurricane Center page, you can see that we have one disturbance out in the eastern Atlantic. That one is expected to go out to sea. It's not expected to have really any impacts on land. It has a 20% chance of developing within the next 5 days. And then, of course, we have Hurricane Grace, which will quickly become a tropical storm as it's on land right now. And then we have Tropical Storm Henri, which will quickly become a hurricane because it is expected to strengthen quite nicely over the next few hours. If we look at the Tropical Storm Henri as of right now, it's located at 33.6 degrees north by 72.7 degrees west, maximum winds of about 70 miles per hour, and a minimum pressure of 993 millibars, moving north-northeast at about 12 miles per hour. Looking at the satellite imagery, you can see that it does look like a fairly well-developed storm as of right now. You can clearly see where we're getting some of the dry air in on the western side, and then we're dealing with some of that moisture being pulled in on the eastern side of the cyclone. So it is fairly well developed. You do have a little bit of a trail of clouds and moisture on the bottom end of the storm. And this is going to go straight up to the north, and then we have a little bit of a predicament. This does have the potential to curve to the northwest, depending on how strong this upper level trough is over the Carolinas. Or if that trough is a little bit weaker and Henri is a little bit stronger, it could move into eastern Long Island and into areas like southern New England. So we do have two different options, and it has greatly changed. The rainfall forecast especially has changed quite a lot. Now we're dealing with some heavier pockets a little bit further to the west. We're going to be looking at the rainfall forecast in just a few moments. Looking at the current watches and warnings again, you can see that we have those hurricane warnings, which actually do extend into southern Rhode Island. They cover much of southern Connecticut and into Long Island as well. We have some tropical storm warnings up for parts of New Jersey and New York, and then we have, as well as a little bit of Connecticut, and then we have some of those tropical storm warnings also up for some parts of southeastern Massachusetts and into southern Rhode Island. You can see that for the cone forecast from the National Hurricane Center, this is the 8 a.m. update. So I'm recording this at 8:03 a.m. right now. The update just came out, and you can see that we have the expectation that this becomes a hurricane over the next couple of hours. I was actually quite surprised that it didn't. When I woke up this morning, I was expecting it to probably be a hurricane by this point. It is very close. They have a aircraft recon. They have an aircraft in there doing aircraft recon right now. And right now, they didn't find any big areas of hurricane force winds. Again, that pass is not complete at all. It just started about 15 minutes ago, where they entered the storm. So I don't have that map up for today, just because, of course, they're still going through there. If they do find hurricane winds, I would expect that probably by the 2 p.m. update, they would have that updated on their website, or maybe even the 11 a.m. update. They may have that up on their website. Then it's expected to become a tropical storm as it's heading over Long Island and into southern New England. Again, this cone is still over a fairly wide area. Even though it doesn't look like that, that is a fairly big area, especially for this region of the United States, where this is going to have a big impact on exactly what happens. If this takes the westernmost track, you're looking at the bulk of that rainfall and strong winds coming right onto Long Island and then in through the Hudson Valley of New York. If we have a little bit of that western or the eastern track, now we're looking at this storm mainly missing out on all these areas to the west, and now we're dealing with areas in southern New England and eastern Long Island getting the brunt of the storm. It'll have a big impact on not only the rainfall, but also the storm surge, and then also the wind expectations. So this is going to play a big role into it. And we have the cone, which is basically the width of Long Island right now, which is a fairly big distance. That's about 60 miles or so, 40 to 60 miles. So that is a fairly big cone that we want to kind of narrow down. Luckily, again, there isn't too much discrepancy within the models. It looks like somewhere over central or eastern Long Island is going to be that impact zone. Although, again, there are some outliers which have it a little bit further to the west or a little bit further to the east. Then once it moves into the inland areas, so for parts of central New England, weakens down into a tropical depression by Monday afternoon. It should be making landfall by Sunday afternoon. So fairly slow moving storm. And then it quickly speeds out into Atlantic Canada, so areas like Nova Scotia, and then eventually into areas just south of Newfoundland, where that storm would be passing. Taking a look at Tropical Storm Henri and the cone forecast and the track forecast, you can see that we do have some models which are deviating a little bit further to the east. In my opinion, those are not going to happen. We're looking fairly set that I would say 70% of these models and most of the most of the forecasts from the National Hurricane Center show this moving on land somewhere and making landfall over Long Island or southern New England. So somewhere over that area is going to be where the landfall zone is going to be or is expected to be. Looking at the rainfall, now, if you remember from yesterday, we were expecting the rainfall to be much more centered over this area right here. We had a few bands of 4 to 6 inches south of Boston and into parts of Rhode Island and Connecticut. And look at it now. Now we're looking at less than an inch in eastern Massachusetts, maybe 1 to 2 inches in Rhode Island, central Massachusetts. And the bulk of the rainfall has now shifted over to the rest of Connecticut, western Massachusetts, much of upstate New York, down to Long Island, northern and central New Jersey, and then also into eastern Pennsylvania. So this is where we're dealing with 2 to 4 inches of rainfall. And then we have a tiny area, or actually a fairly big area for this storm, of 4 to 6 inches of rainfall, which covers a good portion of Long Island into eastern New Jersey and also parts of upstate New York, western Connecticut, and into a little bit of Massachusetts as well. And then we even have a few pockets of 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. So we're not going to be completely certain on where those 6 to 10 inch pockets are going to be, but I would not be surprised if we see a few rainfall reports up near 6, 7, or 8 inches of rain because of the storm. It is going to have a big flooding impact, not only because Tropical Storm Fred just went through these same areas, right in these areas right here, and brought a lot of rainfall. That was Tropical Storm Fred just a few days ago. Now you're adding on all this rainfall, and the ground is already saturated. So the risk of power outages from falling trees, which this is a very forested area of the country, the risk of seeing some power outages definitely quite high. high, especially for areas that are away from those urban areas, because those areas typically are not going to get the power back for a good 24 plus hours after the power goes out. So unfortunately, if the power does go out, it is going to be tricky to restore it, because the storm will be still going on. It will still be raining, and typically the power crews don't go out while it's raining, because of course that causes issues with electricity and all that. So it will be tricky to try and get the power back wherever the power does go out, and all that rainfall is definitely not going to help issues. Taking a look at the flash flood risk, you can see this has also shifted. Now we have a big area of moderate risk, which covers pretty much that entire area of northern and central New Jersey into the Hudson Valley of New York, and also down to Long Island. We have much of Connecticut and western Massachusetts also under that flash flood risk, 20 to 50% chance or a moderate risk of flash flooding over the next 3 days. The majority of that is going to come Monday morning, so Sunday night into Monday morning especially is going to be when most of the flash flooding threat is going to be. Looking at the storm surge forecast, this is going to be mainly for the areas right along the coast. You can see that from the entirety of the New Jersey coast, we're looking at 1 to 3 feet storm surge according to the National Hurricane Center, 2 to 4 foot storm surge over central and western Long Island, and then you get into Long Island Sound as well as eastern Long Island and points east of there. That's where we're looking at 3 to 5 foot storm surge over this entire area. If you're wondering why, it's because we have, again, that storm expected to make landfall. Let's just say it happens somewhere over central or eastern Long Island. You're dealing with the winds pushing in like this and then rotating out somewhat like this. So you will still have some storm surge as you get to areas, let's say New Jersey or western Long Island, but it's definitely not going to be as much as you're looking at in Cape Cod and southern Rhode Island, Long Island Sound, Connecticut. So that's going to be the main area that you want to watch out for the storm surge, because the waves are going to be coming in and the winds are going to be coming in this way. So it's pushing right along the coast. So again, the track again is going to have a big impact on that. Yesterday, when we were expecting the track a little bit further to the west, we were looking at this mainly impacting these areas, not so much on Long Island. That storm surge has gone up over the past few hours. And then on the northern shores of Cape Cod, we're looking at 2 to 4 foot storm surge. Still something that you want to pay attention to, but the areas further west are going to have much higher storm surge, definitely. Taking a look at the tropical storm force wind probabilities, if you're in that red zone, that's pretty much a guarantee that you'll have winds up near 34 knots, which is around 40 miles per hour. So that is pretty much a guarantee within those areas. If you're in that yellow or gold area, it's fairly likely. I would say actually in the gold or orange area, that's where it's fairly likely, above a 50% chance. So that's where you should be preparing at least for those tropical storm force winds. And then in that yellow or that green area, that's where I think you're probably going to be dealing with tropical depression level winds, and the main impact is going to be rain. Although again, you can't take the winds for granted, because when you have already saturated soil, it doesn't take a lot for these trees to topple over. It really is not going to take too much wind. Looking at the intensity guidance, you can see that this storm is expected to become a Category 1 very shortly. There is a little bit of a discrepancy. You can see how there's pretty much half of the models going just below Category 1 status, and then a few of the models, actually I would say 60% of the models, going up near Category 1 status. All of them go down as it's coming into the cooler shelf waters just south of the northeast coast. And then as it moves inland, of course, it's going to take a big nosedive in the intensity. Then it plateaus at high end tropical depression status, even ex-tropical storm status, as it's moving through New England and into Atlantic Canada as a fairly weak storm. If we look at the upper air pattern and what's causing this, you can see that we have a big upper level trough. If we looked at this yesterday, which I don't have yesterday's map up, but if we were to look at yesterday, you would see that the upper level trough was more not necessarily near there, probably somewhere closer to here. So it was further to the west, meaning that it's not pulling in Tropical Storm Henri, which is right here, as much. Now that is all the way into Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia. So it's much further to the north, much closer to the storm, and that's bringing this much closer to the coast, because this low pressure system right here is kind of spinning like this, and it's bringing in the storm and pulling it in. The stronger that upper level trough gets, the more likely that you see more of a curve into, let's say, New Jersey or western Long Island. And then the weaker that is, or the stronger that Henri is, the more likely this curves out into Cape Cod, Rhode Island, Connecticut, eastern Long Island. So the trough here is really kind of giving these models a really hard time with what's happening, and that's causing some discrepancy. This is a really complex storm to forecast, because we have many moving parts. We have an upper trough in the northern plains. We have a high pressure up in eastern Canada, which is helping to slow down that storm, which also will have an impact on the track. We have the difference between the warm waters over this area and the cooler waters up here, which also will have an impact on intensity, which will have a downstream impact on the track. And then we have this upper level trough, which is the main feature, which upper level troughs are always a pain to forecast. Even in the winter time when we're dealing with winter storms, these are also always the type of setups that can lead to these big discrepancies within the models and big surprises within either winter storms, or in this case hurricanes and tropical storms. Looking at some of the models, we're just going to quickly look through them. You can see that the European model has it a little bit further to the east into eastern Long Island. If we look at, and I'll also mark these out. So here is the European model, which is this black dot right here. If we look at the GFS model, you can see that it's fairly close to it, and I'll do that one in a pink dot. So that's right here. And then if we look at the NAM 3KM model, you can see, and I'll do that in a blue dot, that it's right here. So the NAM is the western outlier, and then we have the European and GFS both further to the east. In my opinion, this is probably going to be closer to the west than what some of these models are showing. I think it'll probably make landfall in eastern Long Island if I were to have to make a bet on it. But this is a tricky storm to forecast, so we can really see a lot of changes within just a few hours. And that's what we saw after I made my video. By about 3 or 4 hours, we saw a rapid change within the forecast, where we were first expecting it to go into Cape Cod, and now it's shifting over to, let's say, Long Island and Connecticut a little bit more. So there has been a big shift even just a few hours after I posted my video yesterday morning. Looking at the aircraft recon, I don't have the one from today because that's still going through, so it would still be updating by this point. But if we look at the one that they last went through, which was last night or early this morning, you can see that we have some winds gusting up just below category 1 status. So you saw those dark red colors. That's 60 to 64 knots, which is about 70 miles per hour. So that's why we have the confirmed wind speed at 70 miles per hour. So we need to get that up to 74 miles per hour or 64 knots in order to get category 1 status. I would not be surprised if by the 11 a.m. update or the 2 p.m. update we have a category 1 hurricane over the Atlantic waters. Now, talking about the photo of the day, which is what I was talking about in the earlier part of today's video. This is from Isaac Childers, who's a fairly active commenter on my channel. Thank you for sending it in. If you want to send in your photo, just do it at the email address on the bottom of your screen. It's also in the description down below. He sent me a picture of mammootous clouds, which are usually associated with severe storms. They can stretch for miles north to south or east to west. And usually it happens because you have pockets of warm air rising just right next to little pockets of cooler air sinking. So it does cause these kind of cool effects in the clouds where you can see little bubbles forming up here. It does look very, very cool. And thank you for posting or putting that photo in. If you want to have your photo featured, definitely just leave a email to that email address, and I'll look through them and I'll pick one of them and feature it in the video. So tell me if you guys like the idea, and I'm gonna see if I'm probably gonna continue it, or maybe I'll just stop it, just depending on whatever you guys want. So that is gonna wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.